You saw the title. I've been working on this prototype for just over 2 weeks now, and I just wanted to show you what I've gotten done so far. You might be surprised. I'm calling the game Sudama. It's an FPS with source-style movement, a procedurally generated map and mechanics inspired by classic roguelikes like NetHack, and visuals reminiscent of Doom. So let's see how it's made. Oh, by the way, some of this footage will be from old Twitter posts, but I didn't record everything, so some of the footage will be from the current version of the prototype. I spent the first few days working on movement. The first day was just about setting up basic camera movement and WASD controls. It wasn't very smooth and the mouse sensitivity is way too high, but I'm proud that I was able to get all this done in only a day. I spent the second day making the movement smoother. I introduced some velocity dampening and improved the air control, making the movement similar to that of the Source engine. On the third day, I made the movement even more Source-esque by adding the ability to crouch. I expanded this by adding a roll move, which you execute by tapping the crouch button while walking. Theoretically, you would also be able to long jump by rolling and immediately jumping, but due to a physics bug which I had yet to solve, it wouldn't impart any extra momentum from just jumping. I would eventually fix that later though, so long jumping works properly now. Maybe a little too well, in fact. On the fourth day, I added the first gun to the game. It was just this red sphere which suits blue spheres. Or maybe it's throwing them? I didn't think too hard about the animation, it was just a proof of concept. On the fifth day, I added the second gun, which is way faster. And green. I also made it so that guns point towards the spot where the crosshair is pointing, as long as the crosshair is actually pointing towards something. On the sixth day, I added this gun I call the Boomer. You charge it up and it shoots this projectile that explodes in a giant blast. I also used this opportunity to add another essential feature, rocket jumping. On the seventh day, I decided to rest. No, I'm just kidding. I started on the hit scan weapons. The first one was this yellow SMG type gun. It's pretty boring, but it proved that hit scan weapons are possible and, in fact, very easy. On the eighth day, I added what is probably my favorite gun so far, this explosive minigun. You rev it up and shoot at the same time, so you have an incentive to just keep it revved and shoot constantly. Also, since it's explosive, you can hover with it. I would later find out that you can even climb walls with it. The ninth day was a Thursday, and I would take the rest of the week to work on the weapon switching system. First, I made a prefab that holds a discarded weapon. It hovers and spins like any good weapon would, obviously. It also has a collider that tells the player that a weapon can be picked up. Then I made it so that the player would press the Q button to drop the weapon in their left hand and E for the right. If you're near a discarded weapon, you'll pick that up at the same time. I didn't want the player to be defenseless if they drop both their weapons though. In the future, I'll have some fist weapons, probably a grab and a chargeable punch to knock enemies out of windows. For now though, I just use those first two weapons I made as the defaults. Skipping forward to the next week, I started day 12 by designing a basic enemy. I call him the Paperboy. See that neat billboard effect? It was inspired by the original Doom, where each enemy just has a number of sprites depending on the angle from which you view them, rather than one 3D model. Mario Kart 64 does the same thing with the kart models. The problem with this approach though is that you can't tell exactly where the enemy is facing, which is pretty important for this type of game, especially since I want relatively advanced enemy AI. So I made something I call a smart billboard, which is really just a flat plane that rotates in 90-degree intervals to face the player. When it does this though, it displays a different set of sprites. I think the look is pretty surreal but also readable, so it's a nice compromise. On day 13, I made it so you can actually hurt our little Paperboy. You couldn't brutally destroy him though, only push him off the level, which is lame. On day 14, I started feeling bad for the Paperboy, so I gave him a chance to defend himself by hiding behind a little clipboard after getting hurt. Once the AI gets more advanced, we'll probably do this at different times, but this works for now. On day 15, I still kind of felt bad for the Paperboy, so I gave him the ability to shoot paper airplanes at you. I just modeled this one up in Blender and threw it into the world. He throws the airplane after hiding behind the clipboard, and he aims at whoever hit him last. This last nuance is important because it allows for paper airplane wars after one Paperboy hits another, kind of like when two skeletons fight in Minecraft. On day 16, I didn't feel bad for the Paperboy anymore, so I made it so that he could die. Now we're getting pretty close to where we are now. On day 17, I started on the basics of random map generation. I created the class that holds the different patterns of walls in two 2D arrays, one for the walls that face along the x-axis and one to the z-axis. Now we're caught up to roughly the present. On day 18, I made the wall generation a little bit more concrete, making it so that the walls actually generate. It's pretty much random what walls will appear where, except for the windows surrounding the whole office. I also added random patches of enemies and gun pickups scattered around. So, just to catch up, I made our surprisingly nimble character, I made a few ugly guns, one of which is really fun. I made this wimpy enemy, and I made this randomly generated office. Over the rest of the month, I'll add a few real guns, make maybe one more enemy, and probably make the office generation a bit better. Have a good day!